am your host, Mystic Raven, and today we're going to be discussing whether you should proc or not. The question really came up for me the other day when I was reading on the forums, and a player was really complaining about proc effects taking over the game. Now, while it is true that proc effects have become very popular and very resourceful in your individual builds, I do believe there are a lot of options that players overlook when it comes to redefining your build, especially when you don't want to use proc effects. For example, the first thing I came across when I was going through these sets, and especially I'm on my Magic and Nightblade, is sorry about that. The Spider Cultist set, for example. Now, the Spider Cultist set is one of the new drop sets that drops in Fungal Grotto. Now, as you guys can see, I have the Inferno Staff and it isn't sharpened. The reason being that we can't get Nirnholm in Fungal Grotto. But it's very important to realize that during the 5 Ps, I'm getting 429 spell damage towards my Destruction Staff abilities. Now, this would increase if I go ahead and I make all of the gear purple, but of course, I've just been testing it and running it to see what it's capable of doing. Anytime you're actually trying to figure out what's best for your build, it's always best to test and decide whether or not it fits your playstyle. But one of the best things about the 5-5 switch is typically there are no proc effects. Now keep in mind that you can go ahead with, like, say, Juliano's in Scathing Mage, which does have a proc effect to maximize your DPS on your back bar, because that proc effect, along with Juliano's, would stack the spell damage, thus increasing your DPS dramatically. I mean, it is no comparison what it would do against most setup combos. But it gives a lot of flexibility while you're in the build process. So if you're a first-time player trying to acquire your monster sets or, more end-game sets, 5-5 switches come in very handy, especially now since there are a lot more options. The first thing I'll always recommend to players anytime you're thinking about doing a 5-5 switch is try to keep the Undaunted passive. Keep in mind that the Undaunted passive gives you 6% towards all your stats. That's including your magicka, your stamina, and your health. For this reason alone, we went ahead with the 5-5 switch with Julianos. So we're running a 5 Spider Cultist along with 5 Julianos. The reason being, once again, we can go ahead and maintain our Undaunted. We have a light head infused, we have a heavy chest infused, and we have a medium shoulders in divine. That allows us to maintain that 6% without dropping, and it allows us to increase our DPS. Now, as you can see on any 5-5 switch, we can't go resto destro or destro destro, so we have to use the dual wield, which isn't a bad thing, because when you take a look at the passive for the dual wield and we go down to sorry, wrong one. When we take a look at Twin Blade and Blunt, each sword's going to give us a 2.5 increase. Now, consequently, since we're putting 2 swords on, that's a 5% increase to our DPS on the back bar. And so it's really, really important to remember, even though you're not using a Destro or a Resto, you're still picking up that extra DPS, but you'll have to rely on your class-based abilities. Now, one of the major things that I'm always asked is, what determines whether or not you should go with a 5-5 switch or if you should use a proc effect? Well, this is great. This is up to your individual play. For example, typically I do run Mulakina. Mulakina is great because the proc effect will actually allow me to increase my DPS, especially on the burn. However, does it optimize on every one of my characters like that? Absolutely not. My Stamina Sorcerer is a prime example of that. I can't use a monster set because I inherently lose DPS on proc effects because I typically run a 5-5 switch with the Night Mother's Gaze, which gives me this the penetration. So it's not always going to be the case. You have to understand that you have to experiment with your build. Now, for this specific build, we decided to go DPS, obviously. And when I take a look at the inventory for the swords, obviously I went with the Nirnholm. Once again, I do have that penetration. But for example here, On the back bar, which is my primarily my single target bar, we have Degeneration. We have Funnel Health. I toggled both of these back and forth to get the effect of Might of the Mage. We have Reaper's Mark. Now, I like Reaper's Mark on the Nightblade way more than Elemental Drain. Elemental Drain's great for sorcerers, for example, because they don't have a penetrating effect. But for the Nightblade, this is the better option because not only does it give you the spell penetration, it's also giving physical penetration, which helps your group. Also, we have Impale because that's our finisher at the 25% mark. Now, for this build, you could actually run with Grim Focus in the morph to that if you wanted to, depending on how much you weave. And it acts like a finisher, but you're getting a lot more effects way before the 25% mark. Also, of course, we have Shooting Star. Me being a Dunmer, I want to maximize my potential with my DPS, and that's a fire effect. On the back bar, since we are running the Spider Cultist, and as you can see, once we do the switch out, we now have the 5-piece of this. So when we're on the bar, on this bar, we have 5 of this and 3 of Julianus, and when we're on the Julianus back bar, we have 5 of Julianus and 3 of the Spider Cultist. Now, Spider Cultist, the only thing I don't like about it is that it does give max health, but another thing that it also gives me is a lot of survivability. So on the back bar, you're going to notice my spell damage go down, but consequently, you're not going to see the increase to the effects of the destruction staff. That's very important in remembering when you're taking a look at your stats. So you'll see that drop there. So, and that's the indicator. Now, also, when we take a look at the back bar stats, you'll see the spell damage increase, but the health stays the same, but the max magicka will also increase slightly. So I think, let me make sure about that again. Yeah, so there's a 40 on the staff side, and then on this we're at 44. Now keep in mind that's because of the way I've laid out my skills and my abilities. Now, I did get to try this out and test it, and it did work out pretty good. Now, keep in mind, I didn't go gold with any of my sets, but it just raises the question whether or not you should proc. Proc effects are great, especially with monster sets, but consequently speaking, they're not reliable. They're never 100%. Unless they're even up to 50%, you can't rely on proc effects. 5/5 switch, you have hard numbers to back you up. But once again, are you going to be maximizing out your DPS that way? Probably not. But keep in mind, though, guys, that you can go ahead and acquire the 5/5 switch on a lot of builds easier during the process of obtaining the gear that you need. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. When we take a look at the champion points for this setup, we decided to go with a dot build. And a burst. So it's a burst / dot effect, because in our rotation we're laying down the dots of the effects of the Destro and switching out to the dual wields to maintain more single target DPS. So once again, we're 21% into Elemental Expert. We want Elfborn up to at least 10% to maximize a little bit more crit, but not making it a focal point. Spell Erosion becomes the main focus here, because when we go to the back bar, keep in mind we're not running Sharpen, but with the penetration, the mark, and the light armor, our pen is there. So we have 47 points into it, giving us a total of 2,653 added to our light armor, which is 4,884. Now, when we take a look, we don't have anything into the Atronach. And then in Thaumaturge, we brought that up to 12% because we're running a lot of dot effects in this build. Everything else is pretty much standard for my build. I usually run Ironclad a little bit. I have my resistance for my PvP. I will adjust that accordingly depending on my layout. And of course, we have 48 into Hardy, 65 into Elemental Expert, and 25 into Bastion at this moment, because most of the time I do heal, but I can switch that off and put more into my resistance. We have 41 into the Magician, reducing the cost of our spells, and of course 23 into the Arcanist, because we really want to keep that regen high, especially on DPS, because as a Magicka DPS, we can't rely on Shard or other effects to recoup for us. I put 2 in Tenacity because I do weave, but not quite frequently on the Nightblade. Now I do weave a little bit more on the Sorcerer, so I will adjust this accordingly depending on the build. Since I am a Vampire, I put 16 points into to healthy, because this just helps me recoup that health versus the loss on that vampire. And I put one into tumbling. Now I'm going to actually try to queue this. I can't guarantee anything, but it'll at least give you an idea of what's going on with the build and how we really kind of keeping competitive. Okay, so Wayrest Sewers I still have from the other day. I don't know if I can actually get it, but let's see. Now, typically when I'm running my normal setup, when I do a meteor, I can actually crit that for 45. With this setup, I'm hitting around 40, 41, between 40 and 41, which, you know, like I said, I don't have all the gold gear, so I can imagine a push up to about 42, 43, which is not really that bad. It's, like I said, it still keeps competitive, and, you know, it really works for me. Oh, and as far as the back bar, I didn't get to go over this. Keep in mind we are running the cultist, so we want to primarily focus on destruction staff abilities. Now, I haven't morphed the Destro ability yet, which is Firestorm, because I have the destruction staff on, but we use Flame Clinch. Once again, this is a dot effect. This is really going to help us with single target, especially on the back bar rotation. We have Unstable Wall. This is a dot effect as well with an AoE. Refreshing Path, it gives us a little bit of cushion with an AoE effect and /dot, and of course Ring of Fire. Now, instead of using, I typically use Pulse, but Ring of Fire once again is a dot effect. So during my rotation, I'll lay down all my durated dot effects and AoEs, because then when I go to single target, those are still damaging and proccing while I'm laying down single target DPS, especially on my boss fights. This increases my DPS significantly. If I go focus just on my single target bar, I'm losing DPS because I don't have my durated effects down nor my dots. So keep that in mind when you're going throughout your rotation. Might seem a little bit, but every little bit adds up. Now, like I said, I just don't know if I'm going to get this queue or not, but at least I can go and kill some stuff while I'm waiting. I'm hoping to get it. I might even queue a random here. But, sorry, that's my daughter. She had an appointment today. But yeah, guys, I really, really liked a lot of options that the devs put out there with the new drop sets. They offer a lot of flexibility, especially when you're trying to put together sets that you still haven't acquired yet. So keep that in mind, that you do have a lot of options. And what you really want to kind of watch out for, I mean, you can go with 5/5 stacks if you want to, but if you do 5/5 stacks typically, especially with drop sets, now, it would be more beneficial to you to do a drop and / craft or monster set, because then you could get the heavy and medium and retain your undaunted passive. But once you lose that undaunted passive and you're running all light, you're going to, like I said, drop your stats significantly. So let's see if I can find anything to actually kill here. I'm hoping to get this queue. I might even queue a random. It's one thing about DPS, guys. You know, whenever you queue as a DPS, it takes a while sometimes to get a proper queue. Now, I'll always try to keep above the 20 on the crit on my single target. Might of the Mage really helps out on that. I can't really stress enough to watch your builders throughout your rotation, because if you're not using your builders properly, you're going to significantly lose DPS. And you got to, and on console, we don't have any indicators or mods that are telling us when these are dropping. PC, they actually do, and that makes it them a, it makes it a lot more effective for them, especially when they know when their buffs are dropping. Now, you can use the lightning staff if you want to push out more AoE damage, but for this build, I mean, we really do get a nice amount of dot effects laid down with the Inferno staff. So I really did like to opt for this with this specific build. Okay, I'm actually going to queue a random. Let's see if I can get a queue faster that way. Alright. I don't even care at this moment. Duration 39 minutes. Oh my god. This is killing me. Oh, I'm definitely going to get that. Sorry about all the background noise, people. Alright. Ah, there we go. I'm actually not going to, since I'm recording, stay in that voice chat. Okay, I want to make sure my food buff stays up. Now, once again, guys, I don't know what I'm rolling with. I don't even know if I'm in vet at this moment or anything. I know I queued both, but... So we lost somebody. I don't know why. It's a DPS. I'm not too worried about it. But everybody's 561. Oh my god, no! Why? Why? No, I'm on a death. Oh no. Why? All I can keep asking myself at this point is why? Wow. Now I'm on a cooldown and I can't queue it. It kills me. It kills me. Devs, you really need to take a look at that. If the group disbands, that timer should not be in effect. That's not fair to a lot of players, especially when a disband happens and it's nobody's fault. Being vote kicked is one thing, but when a party disbands that's not a player's fault, and I would totally, especially for DPS, when you're, excuse me, when you're having to wait for a, the timer to tick down. That's crazy. But yeah, guys, I definitely, a lot of my characters, I do like to roll 5-5 switches. So, and for me personally, that definitely comes in handy when determining whether or not I want to go with a proc effect or not. But I definitely want to, push out there. It's not a requirement, You can make a build without a proc effect, This is completely doable. Dang it, that thing. I wanted to get my impale. I need to find something really big. Now, I do have the elegance set. If you're going to do a lot of weaving, it's a great, great set. I'm not going to say it isn't. But now, as you guys can see, I've laid down all my dots. Unfortunately, I still can't get my impale off. My dots are just ticking too fast. But it definitely, for a rotation's very key to anything. Understanding what effects are being applied. There it is, 39K on my impale. So I mean, if I gold this up, I'll push over 40K with the impale, which is really good. And keep in mind, I'm not using a monster set, so you really got to keep all of these things in consideration when you're making the build and how your rotation's going and what effects you're going to be getting out of it. Play to your guys' play to your strength, not your weaknesses. And that's what I always say. Just because it works for me doesn't necessarily it's going to work for you. But it is very interesting to say the least when people are talking about rotation. And especially if you're going to be doing like any type of arenas, DSA, VMA, or anything like that, know your layout. Becoming familiar with your layout is definitely the key to success in a lot of content. Forgot to hit that proc, but oh well. That's 22 base. Let's see if I can get this to crit. 41. So, and like I said, with my other setup with my proc, I'll get a 45. So, it's questionable. But once again, the resources that typically I have for Mulakina is a lot less. And keep in mind, in long-durated fights, that is a factor. I'm still not hitting that impale. But as you guys can see, this is a pretty good build. If you guys want to use it, please feel free, especially if you don't have your monster sets acquired, if you don't have your trial sets acquired. It's very competitive. It does keep up pretty damn good. I'm pretty happy with the results. Once again, do I like the max health? It's questionable. But it puts me over that 20K. And at the end of the day, once again, it's all going to come back. Is this, like Scathing Mage and Julianos, I just had posted on somebody's site, I'm not going to say who, but they had a pretty decent build, but once again, they were kind of talking about Twiceborn Star, and I said, Twiceborn Star, with this setup, I would agree Twiceborn Star is better. However, you didn't take into consideration a 5-5 switch with Julianos and Scathing Mage. When the Scathing Mage procs and you go to the back bar on duel with the Julie, like I said, this effect will stack, and you will see a significant amount of DPS more than using a monster set or Twiceborn Star will give you, because keep in mind, Twiceborn Star, you can't run a 5-5 5-5 switch. You could do a double 5 stack, but keep in mind you would still lose out on the DPS because you're not running willpower. Willpower gives you more bang for your buck when you're talking about 5-5 switches, but not every combo will switch up and run efficiently with the 5-5. So in the past, that's why it's been a little bit harder for Magicka users to come up with 5-5 combos. Healers could, but DPS, they were kind of limited up until this one Tamriel, and they really gave a lot more flexibility to the player's builds. Now, when it comes to PvP, once again, I typically don't discuss PvP, but I will let you guys know. In PvP, depending on the scenario, I do like having the ability of running 5-5 switches. Do I run all my builds with 5-5 switch with PvP? No, but it definitely comes in handy, especially when I want a lot of survivability for PvP on 1v1s. So that is a very important process to kind of remember. So pretty much that's about it. I don't even think I can still get in. Maybe I can. No, I can't. But whatever. If you have any questions or comments, post below. Especially, I'd like to know what you guys are running, what you guys prefer. Have you guys tried the 5-5 switch? Have you tried the new proc effects on some of the new sets? What setups do you like? Do you run a double 5? A lot of these, questions should be asked. And once again, it becomes completely based on individual gameplay. When we're talking about best in slot, keep in mind that every gear isn't necessarily the best in slot for that class or that build, because depending on your build and on your class, that may not be best in slot. And because once again, everything is different. If you're using, let's say, the Destruction Maelstrom Staff, and you got it, are you using the ability to proc it in your rotation? If you're not, that's not best in slot for you. Does that mean you'll be suffering DPS by not slotting it? Absolutely not. Once again, it depends on your rotation and on your build. Now, there are certain rotations that are more effective than others, and once again, you have to become accustomed to that as a player, as an individualized player. So I'm just kind of curious what you guys are all running, what you guys think, and whether or not proc effects are absolutely a necessity in endgame. I would disagree, and I don't think it is. But once again, it gives you a lot of different options to use proc effects from monster sets or gear, or versus, a standardized set. I do want to hear your guys' comments and feedbacks. I want to thank everybody for watching. And once again, and always, have a nice day.